About to ring our welcome bell. So we're going to line up, and as we enter the temple, we bow. And some people do that just out of tradition. This is the sacred thing that they've had in their family or their culture for a long time. I invite you, whether you're here in VR or on the live stream, to just think that you're making a time for your own personal development. It's a sacred time, or it's a special time to just enter this place and leave everything else behind. Then when we come in, we bow to the enlightened being. And I invite you to just, while you're there, take a deep breath, find the strength, the wisdom, the goodness within you, and honor that. Feel that. And this session is for you to give that part of you the attention it deserves. And then we just grab a cushion and we'll start with our intention setting. So here we go. So we're just going to start by setting our intention. And as I say these words, you might like to repeat them to yourself. You might like to rephrase them in a way that makes more sense to you. You may like to feel them. You may like to imagine them. So for this intention setting, just do with it whatever will serve you the most. So we come together for this time to support one another, that we can be there for each other, that we can be there better for our friends, for our family, for our community. Let's just set the intention that this time is to learn, is to cultivate positive feelings and perspectives. And that these positive qualities we cultivate, we hope that they not only bring happiness and peace to us, but to everyone around us. And that ultimately, as our communities become happier and more peaceful, we make better lives all together. So welcome to those of you who are here on the live stream. It's nice to see a bunch of you here already. Please write in on the chat. I'll be checking if you have any questions or comments, and the same with everybody else here today. We still have space here in the temple. If anyone's thinking about coming in and joining us, please come on in. Okay, so today I was hoping to make our session mostly around the practices of meditation and the experience of meditation. I plan to guide some longer, more in-depth meditation. And I will put forward a few ideas around the meditations. And if anyone has any questions, or let's just let those discussions go wherever suits us. And if there's not a lot of questions, I guess we'll do more meditation this evening. So I wanted to start with a mindfulness exercise. We'll do a brief mindfulness exercise and then discuss mindfulness, its implications, its practice, and then do a deeper mindfulness meditation. So mindfulness in day-to-day living is just being aware of what's around you and being careful how you treat others. But mindfulness, when we talk about it from a meditative practice, it's being aware of what you're thinking and careful how you talk to yourself. And there are a number of different mindfulness practices. We're just going to start with a very quick one, just to get a brief glimpse of what the practice can be like. So I invite everybody to get comfortable. And when I think of meditation, I like to sit up straighter. My posture kind of adjusts to be more empowered, so that even if I got very relaxed, my body would still feel alert. And then I invite us all to close our eyes and just notice what it's like to be you right now. Some of you might have noticed your posture or what the seat feels like. Some of you might have noticed the music. Some of you might have noticed your breath. Some of you might have noticed what you were thinking. So just keep observing what your attention does. Some of you might notice how you feel. Some of you might notice what you see. Maybe the light coming through your eyes, or maybe your imagination starts to see things. Some of you may notice how your attention moves around. So just continue to notice. And just like looking at a painting, when you first look, you see some of it. But then as you look closer, you can see more details. And as you keep watching your experience in each moment, just look more closely. See more of your experience in each moment. And you'll notice that every moment it's changing. Now think about your day-to-day experience. All the things we do, the places we go, the conversations we have, the thoughts that you have. And there's so much happening in your mind, in your feelings, in your experience, in every moment. And I hope you notice that there is more for you to pay attention to, more for you to be aware of in your experience in each moment. And so some of us in this brief meditation may have become very relaxed. Some of us, the room around you may have disappeared. But as we begin to finish the meditation, you can become aware of your body, your fingers and your toes and your shoulders and your hips. You can notice your breath and take a stronger breath to re-energize and reinvigorate yourself. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes, come back from the meditation, back into the temple. Now I want to say that this practice of just sitting and observing, it can be a relaxing practice. It can be a boring practice. It can be an interesting practice. It can be a little bit insightful. It can be training you to notice a bit more what's going on. And it can be profoundly insightful and life-changing. And so I want us to try to train our minds right now to take the best of the experience that you just had. So sitting here and just watching what's happening in our mind trains us day to day to also notice what you're thinking and notice what your attention's on. And the more you practice it, the more aware you become. You can think of a musician. You know, when a lot of people listen to music, they just kind of hear the music. But someone who's played music a lot, they hear the notes and they feel how the melody rolls into new parts, what the transitions are, what the key changes are. Likewise, when we practice meditation, we'll see a lot more of what happens in our mind. We see how thought leads to feeling, leads to thought. We see how we respond to the scenarios around us. Rather than just having a reaction and then noticing the reaction. When we practice a lot, we see the reactions we have to things as they arise, and we can choose, do I want to do more of that or more of this? Now, I mentioned that this can be like deeply profound and life-changing. So I just invite you for a moment to think about what I just said about being aware of how we perceive things and how we react to things. And think about that in the best way you possibly can imagine. If you were to set that intention or train yourself that you move through life bringing your best to every moment, seeing things through the eyes of peace and understanding, strength, wisdom, love. It's a simple concept to watch our awareness. But in every moment, all you have is your awareness and what you're thinking and feeling and doing. So if you can master that, it's profound. So yes, I could give suggestions of being calm and patient and kind to everybody. I could give suggestions about training yourself to make each moment filled with bliss and happiness. I could give suggestions to notice your own inner thoughts and emotional life and train it and transform it to be amazing. But really, what I was hoping as you thought about awareness is you'd think about how this will help you in your life, what's going on in your world. So in a moment, I want to anyone who has any questions or thoughts, or perhaps you thought about where you could bring more self-awareness, or what it would be like to bring awareness to some part of your life. Or maybe I said, oh, you could bring peace to a part of your life, and you're like, what do you mean? How does awareness make it peaceful? If you have any questions about applying mindfulness to your life, or any thoughts, whether you're here in the temple or here on the live stream, I'd love to hear what people have to say from what we've done so far. Amaza?
Yeah. So I was definitely contemplating different areas of my life where I'm sometimes on autopilot and where some mindfulness could be helpful. I wonder though, because obviously these are the the areas in my life that are not as chill and not as easygoing. Let's say when I'm stressed out because I have to meet a deadline for whatever I'm doing, or when I feel like quick, I need to put the child to sleep, which is obviously the wrong approach to that. But yeah, I'm wondering how to train that specifically.
So your question is in the parts of life where there is the pressure and the hecticness, how do you bring mindfulness there? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because mindfulness works well if I'm in the right surroundings, I would say. And then sometimes it's just like my primal brain takes over and there's just no space for mindfulness. Although that's where it would be most beneficial.
That's a great question. So, as I said, the more we practice, the more we notice. So there's two parts that really stand out from your question to me. One is when you're in that situation, do you remember to be mindful, to be aware? And then the second part is, even when you've remembered to do it, are you then able to put your attention into the piece? Or does the autopilot roller coaster just carry you away anyway? So for the second part of being able to actually become present, that is what happens when we do the practice. So, when we do the concentrated mindfulness practice, the practice that we just did of just observing helps us to be aware. And then there's another kind of mindfulness practice where we try to create a single point of awareness. You've probably all heard of breathing meditation. And there's lots of approaches to breathing meditation, but the one I've found most impactful is where you pick a single point in your nose and you just let your attention fully be there in that spot. And you might be thinking, what on earth has this single point got to do with an intense thing in your life? So let me explain why. As we hold our attention there, and you can make your mind be in that single point, great. But then you start to think of something else. And then you're in this moment of like, okay, I could let my mind go off with that thing, or I can come back to this point. And if you train yourself to be able to come back to that point, that's beneficial. So you could imagine as you practice that more and more, no matter what comes into your awareness, you're able to just more fully and completely just stop and be in this point of awareness. And if you've trained yourself to have this, like the moment you think of stillness, bang, your whole self just always goes to stillness. Then you have that, be able to step into that whenever there's pressure or intensity. So yeah, there's the training to be able to step into that awareness, that presence, that centeredness in any moment. And there's also remembering to do that in every moment. There's two things to practice. Something I found helpful is if you start to think of yourself as someone who is mindful, someone who always has peace and calm accessible to themselves, your subconscious or your image of yourself practices that. It becomes who you are. So, practicing the stopping meditation, the single-pointed awareness, letting your whole mind become that stillness, so that you've got that skill no matter how full power the train is running in your mind, you can always just pull the brakes, instant stop. That's super helpful. Practicing being aware and remembering to do it, as well as having friends who remind you, to support you. Perhaps having things around the house that remind you. Perhaps there could be a beautiful piece of art, or maybe a nice saying written somewhere. Things that help bring you back to that awareness. And then the third point is that idea of the self-image. Thinking of yourself as someone who is someone who's mindful and calm. If that last point of self-image doesn't make sense, you can imagine if someone thinks of themselves as very, very tidy, if there is a mess in their room, they're like, oh, that's not right, and they fix it up. Whereas if someone thinks of their house as really messy, if there's a mess, they don't really notice. Or if someone thinks of themselves as very loving and kind, if they then said something angry, they'd be like, oh, that's not like me. And they'd make sure they said something loving and kind to fix it up. Like the self-image that we have really drives so much of our thoughts and feelings and ideas that arise. So if you can envisage yourself as an enlightened being or a mindful being, and like really spend some time imagining at your core being that kind of person, that will drive and support the whole process. I'd love to hear your response to that.
Yeah, I like the idea of having reminders around, because I think just the knowledge in general has not been good enough, I guess, for me. I mean, not in all situations. I'm getting better, but yeah, still. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. And yeah, I definitely think that more mindfulness is a good idea as well.
You mean spending more time in the practice?
In the practice, yeah.
We can also think of the practice as a metaphor for life or a training for life. When you're sitting, focusing on the breath, sometimes some very strong thought or feeling will arise and your mind's in there, and it might take a little while before you notice, oh wow, I'm just caught up in this thought, and bringing yourself back to the breath. And the more you practice coming back to the breath as fast as you can, and the more you practice noticing every moment, notice my mind, every moment, the more you practice that, the more automatic it becomes in every different part of your life. I almost felt a little hesitant or guilty to mention like putting up the beautiful art and the reminders, because ultimately I would love every one of us to have trained our awareness that we're just aware in every moment. That, I think, should be our main intention, our main focus, is to cultivate this awareness that we always have this sense of greater presence. But yeah, reminders can help us along the way. Okay, so is there any other questions? Otherwise, I'd like to jump into the thing I just mentioned of the single-pointed mindfulness meditation, and we could then continue the discussion from there. Okay, so live stream, people here, let's all get ourselves comfortable. And we're doing a similar meditation to the one we just did, but this time, instead of just watching the mind, we're going to be directing our attention. So we close our eyes. And last time, even though you were just watching, you might have noticed when I said you notice your body, or you could notice how you feel, or you could notice the words in your mind. You might have noticed that me saying that actually brought those things to your attention. And then if I say to notice your breath, we all notice our breath. And we're always breathing. So training ourselves that each breath is a point of calm and presence and stillness is a really wonderful thing to do. So let's just take a couple of very intentional breaths so that it captures your attention. So some schools of meditation would just leave it at that. Just keep your attention on the breath, and little by little the other activity in the mind hopefully would calm down as you can just bring more of your attention into the breath. But we're going to speed up that process by engaging more of our attention. So as you notice the breath, I want you to notice, where is your attention? Are you in your eyes looking at your nose? Are you in your nose feeling the breath moving across the skin? Maybe you feel like you're inside of your head. So I invite you to bring your attention into the nostril. Feel where the air is flowing in and out of the nose. Many people will find there's one point where they'll feel it the most. The cool air comes in and flows past the skin. You might even notice the little hairs in the nostril kind of bristling in the breeze. And I invite you just to hold your attention on that spot. And draw more attention into every moment of it. The cool breath in, the warm breath out. When the breath is filled up and it pauses before it changes directions, notice how it feels. If you notice there's anything else in your attention, imagine that part of your mind also coming into feeling that point in the nose. Imagine if your whole experience was just the flowing of the breath in that point. Like everything else had completely disappeared. And for some of us, we go into that stillness and it feels amazing. And you can just keep going deeper and deeper into that sense of total peace and stillness. But some of us will notice that our mind's still doing other things. So you could imagine that whatever your attention touches, just bring that part into the breath. And then as soon as your attention touches something else, you bring that part into the stillness. Until bit by bit, your whole self will be connected to this stillness. Even if you notice you're having thoughts about the meditation. Oh, what am I doing? Or, oh, whoops, there I went away. Or any thoughts you have. As soon as your attention notices that you're in some words, bring your thinking mind just into the sensation of the breath. Your whole self is just breathing. You may notice sensations in the body or emotions. And just let them transform into perfect peace. your attention just keeps coming back deeper into immersed in the breath. We'll have 5 more breaths. With each breath, give it all your attention on that single point. And when you're ready, you can notice your mind, notice your body. At some point, you'll decide to open the eyes. Just notice as that thought arises. Notice the feeling of the eyes opening. Notice where your eyes look. Notice your attention moving around. Notice how you feel. Now, some people use a metaphor of weightlifting for this practice. It's making our concentration stronger and stronger. And in weightlifting, some people can lift massive amounts. Some people, when they start with smaller amounts. And generally, we do as much as we can, and then we're tired, and it gets stronger. And then when you do it again, you can then do more. And so that was a shorter meditation. So for some people, we might have felt that was just enough to just be getting started. And some people, after that amount of time, they really feel their concentration is tired. So I actually prefer the metaphor of it's more like yoga or ballet or some kind of balancing exercise. So you could imagine standing on one leg. If you've never done it before, you'll be wobbling a lot, and just finding that sense of stillness is like learning to get the mind to be focused on that point. The mind wanders, you bring it back. The mind wanders, you bring it back. You might wander too much and your brain's just gone off and you've fallen off of the balance pose. But then you can get to a point where you really are sitting in this balance. And you could imagine to start 5 minutes of that, and then all your support muscles will be tired. But you could imagine if you practiced balancing poses regularly, you would be able to hold those poses for much longer, and then hours. And meditation is similar. They recommend that 5 minutes is a good amount to start for each meditation. And then very quickly you'll find that feels great, and you can do more and go deeper into the stillness and bring even more of your mind into that single pointed awareness. Now, Amaza, you asked about bringing in awareness and stillness into any situation in your life. Could you see in that practice now how each time you practice just coming more into the stillness, you've learned to do that more? And so we have a little baby, and you see that the first time he tries a new skill, he can then suddenly do that skill. So I hope you could imagine that there's some set of intense things, and the first time you decide, wait, I'm going to decide to come into stillness even no matter what's happening, maybe a couple of times of doing that, boom, you will have learned in this kind of intense situation, this is what it's like to bring my attention into stopping. And then that whole set of things like that, you'll then have that ability. And then you can then practice it into other parts of your life. But there's an interesting thing of when you're feeling the pressure and you've got stuff to do, or there's some emotion that's captured your attention, your primal brain's taken over, I think is the word that you said, is that wants to run rather than going into that stillness and awareness and letting your conscious choosing self be in control. And so I guess it's in these peaceful moments is where you can decide very strongly that actually in those other moments, I'm going to come into this conscious place. And then it's just the practice to know that, hey, there's a pathway from primal takeover brain to stillness. So next time you're in primal takeover brain, you remember that pathway and boom, there I've moved myself back into this conscious awareness. I'm curious if that made perfect sense to everybody. I'd love to hear if there's any parts that anyone didn't follow. Look, Kirav, I know you've been coming regularly. Was that all straightforward?
In a way, I think I understood it in my own logic, tactic-based way.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Commissar and Currents, I'm not sure how much you've been meditating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we just said. Hey, Streximus, welcome.
Hello, sorry to be late.
So we just did 2 mindfulness meditations. One of just watching whatever our awareness did, and then another one where we practiced really concentrating and directing our attention. And then we had a discussion about what about in life when things are intense? How do you bring yourself back into that stillness and awareness where you're able to choose what to do and choose what to feel and not just have your reactions or your primal self take over? And so we were talking about practicing what it feels like to come into that stillness. And I just asked everybody, does that make sense? Is that too abstract? Does it sound real? Does it sound... Did the steps that I described sound like something you can envisage or train into yourself? So yeah, then I opened it up to everybody's thoughts.
I haven't been meditating for very long, but I've noticed.
Fuck.
be resistant to any kind of changes I notice.
Hi everybody. Sorry about my VR chat
worries.
crashing. Commissar, you were saying
Good.
you haven't been meditating so long, but you noticed.
That it has been affecting my life in a positive way, but I find myself to be resistant to that change because it's a new path that I'm not sure what kind of person is on the other side. Probably a better person, but I'm still very resistant to the unfamiliar ways in which meditation has affected me. I know it's made a positive change at my job, which can definitely be stressful, but it's just, I like being a reactionary person, even though I know it's not a good thing. And becoming less reactionary is definitely a positive change, but it's definitely an unfamiliar one as well.
Amaza, you wanted to respond?
That's a question. What is it about your reactions that you like?
I suppose I like. There isn't a lot of moments in my life where I get to be particularly expressive or emotional about how I feel. So when they do come up, I tend to just go forward. And that's not really good, and it often leads to situations that could have ended better. But there's just this very almost addictive feeling to the ability to just be very viscerally reactive, even if it's not in a positive, even if it doesn't net a positive gain for anyone involved.
I love that Amaza asked, what do you like about it? I'm going to say something that's sort of related to what you said as an analogy, and then I'm going to come back to what you said. So a lot of people think, if you meditate enough, you'll just become this super chilled out person, and you'll be just really passive. But that's not at all what I am trying to advocate here. The way I like to think of it is that we build this foundation in our mind of stillness and power. And then we can build whatever we want on top of that. When you've consciously chosen what to be, it's like you can build a building or a skyscraper. And the untrained mind is more like a jungle. It's just like weeds and chaos, and you can have a pretty intense pile of reactions, but it can never be a skyscraper. And it might be thorny, and there might be some berries, but there's also going to be some places that are painful. So yeah, my response when people ask about, isn't meditation just going to make you just so chilled, is actually on top of that stillness, I want people to craft being awesome. What's it like to be really vibrant, to choose to be expressive and powerful? And you can create that on top of that presence and stillness. Now, to apply what I was just saying to what you said, Commissar, is you said that you love to be able to just fully express yourself. So what I would propose is for you to envisage having that expressiveness awesomely. What would it be like to be able to really look into what you wanted to say? Just have a little moment to wow, how can I share this in a way that they'll really get it and that it will bring out the best next part of the conversation? And you can actually make that expressiveness more powerful, and you don't have to just wait until some intense emotion finally kicks in and takes over. You can make it that you can really express yourself much more often. How does that sound?
I'll say. But I'm aware that that's going to take time and practice and a lot of work. So I will work on that, and I will let you know how it goes.
Wonderful. I want to respond to what you said about it'll take time and practice. Well, yes, that's true. However, I don't know when you say that if you mean a couple of days or years. And from what I've seen, being in many different self-development groups and different cultures about change, is in the groups where they think it's going to take lifetimes, the change and the progress is very slow and it's very hard work. And in the groups where they talk about making solid progress, that's what I see. And then in the groups where they talk about profound shifts and enlightening moments and other kinds of ways of describing that, our enlightened self coming through and brain programming and flicking switches in our minds, in those kind of groups, the change is just so much faster. So, I hope that when you think about the ways you want to express yourself, that you're excited about making that awesome. That you feel like, hey, right now, I am going to be fully expressive and wise and wonderful and powerful while I do it. If you think about what your imagination's going to do or what it's going to practice, if you are imagining, whoa, I've transformed right now, struck by an infinite beam of light from the universe and bang, I've transformed. Your brain's going to imagine pretty powerful things that are completely different than if you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be more expressive over the next year. And the things we imagine or the things we practice is what impacts and transforms us. So I hope that when you think of yourself and expressiveness, that you bring as much confidence and power and creativity into that as soon as possible and feel it present and now. Was that relatable or was that like too far out?
Oh no, that was relatable. It's just I'm not the big profound epiphany moment.
Okay, well, how else can I describe what I was trying to get to? Was
No, I understood what you were describing. It's
Yeah.
just, for me personally, I find that I make the most progress when I fully expect to make mistakes and just kind of laugh it off and be okay at it, as opposed to just being like, boom, right now I'm going to be perfect and just make this happen. I'm not good at that kind of instant manifestation.
So I love what you just said about knowing that there'll be mistakes and you can laugh about it. 100%. I wasn't wanting to say that you'll perfect it. What I was hoping is that when you go to think about yourself, you'll feel like really creative and playful to imagine like different ways of being. And so you'll be more free to be expressive. Let me bring it back to a real example. So from now until the next moment that you would have expressed a reactive emotion, if a part of you is like, hey, I'm going to be ready next time to express that awesomely, if you imagine a few times that next time that happens, you're going to express it in a way that really gets to the other person, that they hear it and they hear you and they love you more through seeing who you really are. If you imagine that a few times between now and then that is much more likely to be what you do in that situation than if you think, oh, it'll happen eventually. So yeah, I guess I just want to, two things. Excite more of your subconscious and your imagination and your creativity to be expressing yourself fully, or whatever any of you are thinking about in life. I want to get you excited that this being your best can have your attention and your emotions. And I'm also hoping that every one of us will decide, oh yes, taking a couple of minutes a day to practice being what we really want to be is a wonderful gift to give ourselves each day. Also, you mentioned meditation's been impacting you, and then you are don't know what's on the other side. Who's this other person? So I wanted to address that, is that if you just leave it to chance and you just meditate, the person on the other side is probably going to be kinder and more lovely and more happy. But what actually happens in your mind on that journey is kind of up to a little bit of chance. Which conversations do you have with people? Where does your meditation just happen to flow down the possibilities? So I hope that you also, as well as practicing being expressive in a way that you would love, I hope you also imagine, wow, if meditation really, what if I did get enlightened? What would I be like? And then you get to see what's on the other side, or even create what's on that other side. And then you get to pick, hey, what would make me feel great? What would I want? What do I believe in? So that way there's no unknown. You're becoming who you choose. So we are here in a Buddhist temple, and there's this big theme in Buddhism that life is changing all the time. Every day is a new day. Every chapter of our life we have different jobs and different people, and the way people feel changes from season to season, and people come and go from our lives. And even you change all the time. Even without meditation, in 5 years from now, you're going to be very different to who you are now. And so I guess rather than thinking of, oh, there's this change that's going to happen, know that change is going to happen anyway. So being able to put some love and creativity and attention into that process is a gift that we can give ourselves. How was that?
I liked that.
Good. I was a little worried that you said about being a certain way, not just the instant change. And I was like, oh, but wait, we can imagine that and envisage that. I hope that I was still on the same page with you.
Yes.
Excellent. So, people on the live stream, people here, do anyone else have thoughts, questions, comments around the practice of mindfulness? Whether that's how do we do the meditation and the cultivation better, or how does it apply to life in general, or how does it apply to something specific? Does anyone have anything they want to share or ask?
Sure. I had to do and have gone through, one of the hardest things I've ever gone through yet. And it's definitely colored the practice. Um, it's made it a lot more difficult to be mindful because, trying to guard the mind is a lot more difficult when there's a lot more intrusion happening, a lot more, why did this person do this? Why did this have to happen this way? Wanting things to be different than they are, longing, all those kinds of things. And it's not something I've been able to practice with before. I've been more able to practice when nothing was really wrong, and now that something is kind of wrong, I guess. I mean, there is no good or bad, but it gives that feeling. It's different, and it feels like I all over again don't know how to do the practice.
Well, first of all, I want you to know that we care about you. And can I ask, when you have been meditating recently, you said it's difficult, there's lots more intrusions. Are there still moments where an intrusion will arise and you'll come back to a little more peaceful, or maybe even a moment where you're really peaceful?
It's not so much during formal meditation practice that I struggle the most. It's keeping my mindfulness throughout the day. So once it is more difficult, during formal practice as well, but the larger problem is mindfulness outside of formal practice. Just a lot of, difficult emotions that are very overwhelming, a lot of unskillful desires, attachments that I know I want to shed and feel almost impossible to be disconnected from me.
I'm not sure if you were here when I mentioned to Amaza that the image we have of ourself can really guide what arises from our subconscious. So when a difficult thing happens and there's all this external stuff and all these people, that can get a lot of our attention, or all of our attention. And the intense emotions with it can also carry your attention away. And spending a bit of time to think of who you want to be. How would you be through this situation if you were bringing your real enlightened self to it? If you bring your attention to that, maybe you'll see, okay, today when I speak to that person, this is how I'm going to approach it. And it might not be perfect, other stuff might arise, but if you put your attention into bringing peace and love to that part, or sharing this thing you've decided to share calmly and strongly, if that's a stronger part of your mind, that's much more likely to get more of your attention than just all the other stuff.
I know what my what I would like my response to be. It's difficult. It's difficult to get that response when kind of the mind wants one thing while I guess me or the maybe the skillful part of me knows that that's not the right way to go, and yet it seems like the mind is still in is in control really,
Mm-hmm.
and I can only sometimes divert it away.
So my question is, you say you know how you'd like to be. How much time do you spend feeling how you'd like to be, thinking from that perspective and practicing being that person?
Well, I tell myself what I think is the truth of the situation, that you know, that I've, you know, I won't go into too much into it because it's irrelevant. But trying to tell myself what I believe to be the skillful and truthful way to go about it. I spend a decent amount of time doing that, and then there's a lot of resistance against that. It, you know, inwardly my mind says, no, that's not true. You know, you're never going to be happy unless you get, you know, X, Y, Z. So I guess I could try to increase how often I, you know, make myself think those more skillful thoughts, and instead of giving room for non-skillful thoughts to arise. But it is exhausting. It's a kind of been, it would require really 24/7 guarding a castle as a knight, as I think a sutra I once read. I heard actually earlier today, at the first session. That was a part of the sutra that was being read that I really connected with, describing guarding the mind like a knight at a castle, and I'm like, yes, that's what it feels like, but it's exhausting to have a 24-hour shift 7 days a week doing that, you know, as a guard.
Yep. So 3 responses. One is, you were saying that you do tell yourself these things, and you think them. I hope that you also let yourself feel them. Just for a minute, what would it be like if all the other stuff was gone and you felt the peace, or you felt the acceptance of reality, or whatever the things you're saying to yourself? Make sure, as well as thinking them, you feel them.
Yeah, I try to. I can get glimpses sometimes.
Wonderful. The more you spend time with your intention going there, the more the glimpses will become beams of light, which will then become your whole self. Secondly, you said it's exhausting. And yeah, I know in difficult times there's just so much going on. So I invite you to envisage that while you're doing these things, while you're giving yourself some positive thoughts, or while you're giving yourself a meditation, rather than thinking of it as a night and hard work, think of it as a little vacation. It's a break from all the other stuff that's going on.
Okay, I'll try to think of it that way.
And for people who haven't heard the metaphor of the castle and the knight, if you imagine that your mind is this space that has lots of different thoughts and feelings in there, and it's a little bit of an overgrown wild jungle before you've started meditating. And then once you've meditated, you've like cleared out the weeds, you've made the garden beautiful, and then you really cherish the enlightened mind. So maybe you build up some walls so that there's doors to let all the love and the goodness in, but there's definitely strength around it to not let frustration or anger or just chaos into your mind. You keep the court of your mind this beautiful place. So it's a metaphor that some people like. And the idea of this night at the door, just really deciding what gets my attention and what gets my feelings and my time. Okay, sorry to those who are on the live stream. If anyone knows how I can fix this up, that would be great. Do you want to come into the temple? Hey everybody, sorry again about that.
It's okay.
I also hope that you have people around to give you a hug, and you have music that makes you happy, and you have things that make you laugh, and that whenever things get hard, it doesn't have to be you fighting this fight. You know, a soothing hug, a happy dance, there are things that can soothe the whole process. I wish I could give you a hug right now. Yeah. Well, we're really glad you're here. Yeah, I missed you last week.
Yeah, I was dealing with what it is I'm having trouble with, but it's looks like it's mostly over, and that's the hardest part. At least I think that's what I was doing at the time.
That brings me to the third point that I wanted to respond to. You were saying there's a part of you that thinks, you'll only be happy if you get the certain thing to be a certain way.
Yes, so the mind really believes that. So I mean, I could just say what it is instead of being cryptic. I'm okay with.
We're still on the live stream. If you're happy to share.
Oh, all right. I'll be a little less cryptic. Just a touch less cryptic. I had a life change that outwardly, according to everyone in my life and even myself, if I'm being skillful, can see that this is a good change. This is a necessary change. And yet the mind misses the way things were. I guess that'll be as cryptic as I'll be just for the live stream. But there's that duality of wanting things to be the way that they were when it would be kind of an unhealthy thing to go back to, and also something I wouldn't be able to go back to anyway. And the mind is desiring that comfort and stability and familiarity. It's not a move, but mind wants one thing when reality isn't that way. And moving on is, it was like it's like a death, really. And I've been going through a grieving process, which is very new for me.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've not had experience with grief, with loss, with mourning, it's just been a different challenge. So that's made it extra difficult. Whereas for things like that I'm more used to, like anxiety attacks, I can have them now, and I've noticed through my practice, I've really been able to combat them fairly skillfully with a low amount of reactivity. I note the feeling. I note heat in the face. I note fear, and it dissipates rather quickly and isn't too terrible. Whereas before meditation, it would spiral and go on and on and on. So that is something I've had lots of practice with and been able to deal with. But grief, this is more of a grieving process, and it's been new.
So the meditation that we practiced before you arrived, rather than noting, what we were doing was just instantly coming into just breathing. The intention was actually just breathe. Whatever else is there, just your whole self is just breath. Amaza had asked, how do we be mindful, like really mindful, even when intense stuff is happening? And I was taking the approach not of the mindfulness of labeling things, but the mindfulness of just consciousness, like stepping out of all the reactions, just being present and aware. And so we're going to do actually another breathing meditation at the end of this discussion. So I invite you to practice that technique for this meditation. A couple of responses to what you said. When you're saying the mind does this and the mind wants that, while it's true that there are tendencies for people's minds to do that, and that can be very helpful to read those and then notice them happening, I just always want to be careful. Someone else's mind might not operate like that. So I just want to be careful not to say the mind does that, as in human minds do that. I mean, it's something that your mind's been doing, and it's something that a lot of people's minds been doing. But every mind, every process is different. And as well as saying that to be careful for everybody else's mind, I'm also saying it for you. If you have a belief that your mind will operate that way, even though you're also trying to transform it, if there's a belief that that's what the mind does, that gives just a little more power to that kind of thought process happening more. So I hope you will envisage more of yourself as a person who has peace and has awareness, and you just have that more accessible to yourself.
Yeah, interesting. The teacher I've been listening to a lot has actually talked a bit about. He calls it "fake it till you make it." you behave and treat yourself as an enlightened being, and by just doing that, you get a little bit closer. So that's interesting. You mentioned that kind of idea.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of that. My one critique of fake it till you make it is that sometimes people will focus on the fake it feeling, and then it stays inauthentic. So I actually hope that we can imagine our whole self being it. Like I was saying to Commissar, imagine if right now you've got it. There might be a part of our way of being that thinks, no, that's not now, that's far away. But that's not what we want to practice. We want to actually practice, what would it be like to have it now? If anyone out there on the live stream knows why VR chat's crashing or is better at stabilizing Windows PCs,
Part of,
I'm all
The
ears.
Secret, if you've ever read that book, I think it mentions that too.
So another thing I wanted to say is our mind is multi-layered. It's amazing how we can hold any and every kind of thought in our awareness. And so I've seen people who will fake it till you make it, and they will be able to act happy or confident or whatever kind of thing they want to put on as a face. But then on the inside, they're still saying blah, 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 blah to themselves. And so
I see.
So what I really want to encourage is like that we mindfully watch our whole self, and we want our inner self to also be, I am an enlightened being. I feel an enlightened being at my core, and I act with love and peace and confidence and assertiveness or whatever it is you want to cultivate. So that's also probably what your teacher means. I'm just being careful with the words and trying to put it in a way that hopefully will be more helpful more of the time for more people. But yeah, you were saying there's a thought that unless you get things to be a certain way, you won't be happy. So mindfulness and happiness meditation can definitely help with that. Just being present in each moment to just come back to be, hey, I want to choose what I'm doing right now. That's great. And spending time doing some laughter meditation or dancing to your favorite music and just pumping up a good feeling, getting that part of you stronger, is also super helpful. As well as contemplating attachments and expectations. There's an idea that all of our suffering comes from when we expect things to be a certain way. And if you think about the world around us, it is the way it is. Shit happens, and great stuff happens. Just everything happens. And if you think of your mind or your consciousness and your body as this tool to go through life, and you can make the world better and have a wonderful time, that's one way of using your awareness. How do you just be fully present with reality to then make the most of it all? But we often, or untrained minds can not be fully present with reality. They're more caught in like what they're used to and what they expect to happen. And so these expectations, we're setting ourselves up with what we're actually engaging with is different to what's actually real. And then when there's that disconnect, that's where suffering comes in. Because your brain doesn't know which bit to engage with. And you're trying to engage with something that's actually impossible. And so contemplating that expectations or attachments aren't helpful can be really helpful. For me, when I notice that I have some attachment, or I like to think of it as like this rubber band that's pulling me off to something that's unreal, and I just grab that rubber band as soon as I notice it's an attachment, and I just unhook it, and it just flings away. That's a thought that just is really freeing for me. You might come up with your own metaphor, your own way of thinking about it. and then, I mentioned when my father passed away, these intense things arose. And whenever they arose, I was just like, okay, I'm going to really accept that. And now what? So I hope those thoughts...
Really accept is a skill I'm really engaged with trying to cultivate. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a practice, but it's a very worthwhile practice. But I also want to say, maybe there are some things that you need to make happen that are actually really worth doing. So when I say accepting, I don't just mean that, hey, we just sit back and let life happen to us. It's accepting in this moment. Right now, this is how it is. There might be goals that you want to work towards and make things happen. But if you see that not as like it should be happening, but as something as, hey, I'm going to try and make this happen, that's good. One reason I'm very careful about defining acceptance is like if someone was in a very poor relationship, I don't think we should just accept it. We should say, okay, I'm accepting that that's how that person is and that's how this situation is. I fully accept that. And now what? Then maybe the right thing to do is to distance yourself or to do some big action to change the situation. It's like emotionally accepting right now, and then empowers us. What do we want to do? And what do we want to work on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, that would be an example of some situation you might be able to do something about, or if there's a job you're unhappy with, but you could do something about it, that would be, an actionable thing. But in my situation, it's a thing that there really is nothing I can do.
And it's actually a real gift if you can see there is nothing you can do, then the only thing left to do is to let go of that expectation and to begin to be, how do I be happy, present, and loving with what is now? I hope at the end of today's session I can give you a virtual hug.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
You're the best, NeoJax.
Thanks. Just going to check on the live stream. No comments. Shoximus, can we ask if anyone else has any thoughts or questions or comments?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
So I've been thinking about this a bit, and you've mentioned how you've been working with the meditation on the panic attacks, trying to squash the fear, and that's been working for you.
Not squash. It's not squashing. It's changing. What really changed it, the relationship to it, was when I stopped trying to squash it. That's what fixed it, or helped the most. So sorry, but I know what you mean.
All right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And
keep going.
And you're saying a lot of the issues you've been having are that there are expectations that you want but you can't attain. Right. In my mind, just how I've been looking at things a lot recently, I see expectations as something that you fear you're not going to attain, whereas a goal is something that you can work towards attaining.
Hey, little baby. I love you.
So
I'm
possibly
teaching a
even
class.
rephrasing it and
I'm going to
making
keep teaching. Bye-bye.
goal that you can try working towards.
It's like a death. You can't bring back that person. It's really like bringing back a person that can't be brought back is the thing I'm thinking. It's a longing for the way things were, a longing to go back, a longing for, that kind of thing.
Right, but sorry, this isn't coming out the way I meant. to say it.
No, that's okay.
The expectations of being able to move past it is at the same time a fear of not being able to do that.
I
Whereas
think
a
I know
goal-
exactly what you mean.
Right. Whereas a goal is
I
something
do
that you
have that
can work
fear.
towards, you can practice. And if you see it as a goal that you can just take a little bite out of each time, like how do you eat an elephant? It's a lot more
Exactly
easier
right.
to just climb that ladder one step at a time.
I do have that fear of, will I ever be okay again? Will I ever be quote unquote normal or myself or whatever it is again?
Right.
And that is a fear. Yeah.
And that is something that you don't need don't dwell on it, just make a goal of, all right, if I can do this, I'm one step closer.
Mm-hmm.
It's helped me a lot with a lot of things recently. I just thought
No, thank you
I'm
very much.
I'm nowhere near good as NeoJax is articulating my thoughts. So
No,
I
you
apologize
made
if it's a little-
sense to me.
I love that you were just kind to yourself and just help yourself to go through the next moment, or as you said, one step at a time. Yeah, it's a really good approach. If you just keep bringing back into what's right now, I'll take my next step. Yeah, and you can definitely get through each step.
Exactly. Part of it was you were talking about it was like a death, and I've lost several people over my lifetime, so it really does help to kind of think of it that way. At least for me. I know everybody's different, so.
So I want to share something, and I want us to be able to try and hold what I say at the same time as what Lord Kirov said. So, some of you know my father just passed away really recently, and it was intense. There was these waves of all different kinds of thoughts and feelings. I don't need to put those thoughts and feelings out. But I see myself as someone who has embraced mindfulness and is striving for enlightenment in every moment. And so when those other things arose, as soon as I noticed them, I just brought myself into, how do I just love him even though he's gone? How do I just have peace and warmth and kindness for all the people involved? How do I now think about the world where I will never speak to him again? So all I've left is the positive memories. So, Lord Kirov, you were saying, hey, accepting it's one step at a time. I hope at the same time we can also have a little part of us that can imagine being enlightened right now. You can give yourself a moment where there's just one breath that's pure peace. And the more time you spend in that pure peace, the more of that you've got. So I hope we can have both. There's a famous
Sorry. Go ahead.
There's a famous chant that a lot of Buddhists practice, that the jewel is in the lotus. And people translate what that means in different ways. But my favorite way is that the jewel is this idea of a perfect enlightenment. A diamond can't be scratched, and it's perfectly clear. It's amazing. It's like rock solid. And then this chant is that the jewel is in the lotus, this delicate, beautiful flower. And so I like to think of what that metaphor means to me is this moment is a lotus. Right now, what I focus on and what I feel is this delicate, beautiful little flower. I could easily trample on this moment go into some sadness or some anger. Like, it's delicate, it's careful. We need to look after it like a knight caring for a little baby. But if in each of those beautiful moments you bring the awareness and the peace and the kindness and the love to your experience, that rock solid, forever perfect enlightenment, it's there in each moment, in that lotus. And yes, if you've been practicing it a lot and you've trained your whole subconscious to be this enlightened being, yes, it's you can get to a state where ease and presence and mindfulness happens automatically. Yes, being actually enlightened is a wonderful thing. But I think it's really nice to know that for all of us, in each moment, we can glimpse it, and we can bring ourselves into more and more of those glimpses. And letting yourself envisage that you have that with you, it gives it to you more. It makes each one of those steps more beautiful, more heartwarming, more caring. Lord Kira, if you wanted to say something?
No, I'm sorry about interrupting you there. Pause was a bit long, so I kind of exactly what I was thinking, in the sense of like running a marathon. Every step you take to get to that end, you're thinking of passing that line at the same time. In a way.
Yeah.
At least that's the best metaphor I could come up with.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, I've really loved watching as you've been attending, just your comments. You know, it started off with you saying, oh yeah, it's been a bit helpful, and now you're just like sharing more and more wisdom. It's really lovely to watch.
You've been a good teacher.
We're all great. I was hoping more of you would laugh. Cool. So let me just check on the live stream. All right, so I would like to now guide a longer breathing meditation. So I'm going to really frame the start of the meditation so that through the rest of the meditation you can keep doing this practice that I'm presenting. So for everybody who's here and on the live stream, I invite you to try this practice. Even if you have another practice you do the rest of the time, just to have this experience. So we're going to be doing single pointed breathing meditation, where our intention is to feel the breath and hear the breath and bring our whole self into this single point. If you imagine that your mind is like all different paths, different thoughts, different feelings, all happening at once, this practice is like pointing every part of your mind just to one single point. And yes, for the meditation practice, there's this spot in the nose where the breath's coming in and out. But then that single point of concentration, unifying your whole mind, you can then take out into your life. Like, what is it to have my full attention on this artistic work that I'm doing? What is it to have my entire consciousness choosing acceptance and loving presence right now? What is it to have my entire attention fully present with this situation that's just happened with the person, and to let my most awesome self be expressed? So the practice is just the single point of concentration. But creating this unified consciousness is something that we can then powerfully take out into our life. Also, there's a metaphor that people like to use, that the mind can be like a lake that's stirred up, and the mud's risen, And that whenever you're in a thought or in life or in emotions, you're stirring the lake up more. And that meditation can be to let the entire lake become still. And if a thought arises and your finger kind of follows the thought, you're spending some time, some energy stirring up the lake. Even if you only engage with it just a little bit. So I'm inviting that we just come straight back to the breath. Welcome, Zelda. We're about to do a breathing meditation, and I'm just describing to everybody the practice we're about to do.
Thank you so much. I'm ready to join. I was kind of needing this.
Wonderful. Glad to have you here. So, we're going to be bringing our attention into the breath. And, I've said a few times today and in our ongoing classes that the ideas you have about yourself and about your mind, they shape what your mind does. And so I hope that we will approach this meditation with the idea that there is a deep stillness, a profound awareness, a concentration, a beautiful peace within us. And I'm emphasizing that because sometimes when people describe meditation, they describe the other stuff that happens. But I want to bring your focus into really creating that focus and stillness. And so if you notice any other parts of your mind, your attention goes anywhere else, the moment you notice it, just instantly we come into the breath. And yet, it's like a learning process. When you first ride a bike or steer a car, you've got to learn how to get it to go where you want. And so when your mind goes off onto something else and you come back to the breath, you might have to watch really closely, like, how do I best get it back to the breath? Or that way of getting it back took me a second. That way took me half a second. That way was instant. So just watch carefully how you steer your mind and just keep finding and learning the ways that come more deeply, more quickly, more beautifully into the peace and the presence. One last thing I'm going to say before we start the meditation is our minds have all these different ways of being. We have imagery that we imagine or we see with our eyes. We have sounds and words that you can hear with your ears, or you can also create them in your mind. Like right now, if you were just thinking something, you heard some words in your mind. There's physical sensations that we can actually be feeling, but also we could imagine them. Like if I was to say your hands are feeling warm, some of you would have noticed your hands just got warm. So yeah, there's visuals and there's audio and there's physical sensations and there's a sense of space, and then there's ideas and concepts and emotions. There's all these different parts of our consciousness. So I want you to bring all of them into your breath. You'll be feeling this point. You'll be seeing the air flowing in and out. You'll be hearing the breath. Your whole self, it's a vacation. Everything else just gets to rest, and your whole self is just going to be in this soothing, flowing moment of the breath. So, let me check the live stream. Great, welcome everybody. I just invite everybody to get comfortable. Check your posture. If you're sitting, it can be good to have the feet flat on the ground. Or if you're cross-legged, to have just a check of the hips and the legs to have a sense of symmetry. Something I've noticed with my hands is if I have them further forward or back, my shoulder does something different. So maybe you can just adjust the shoulders, pull them up and back, and then feel where do the hands sit naturally. Check your spine. Maybe just sit up a little bit taller, and then find where you could relax and the spine would just stay there. And I invite you that if you hear the baby, or if you hear any other sounds, that you just use each one of them as an invitation to just really hear the next breath. Anything else that catches your attention just reminds you to go deeper back into the stillness and the peace. So now we close our eyes and we'll start with 3 deep breaths just to really catch our attention into the breath. Make it a really strong breath. Feel it, like it's just so strong, it's there. And then let the breath become natural, but keep your attention really strongly in the breath. If you notice that your mind is thinking any words, just let your inner voice either become slower and the tone of your voice become more soothing. You can see that I'm exaggerating that. So you can do that with your inner voice too. Or maybe your inner voice will just disappear and you'll just be hearing the sound of the breath. And each breath that you take, let it sound more soothing, more peaceful. And then we're going to bring in our feeling attention. So feel the point in your nose. You might notice one of the nostrils in this moment is more experiencing the breath. And you might notice there's some point where you feel the coolness of the in-breath more fully. So if there was one of those points, just keep feeling that point. Or if there's no distinct point, I invite you just to notice the nostril that's stronger and just feel a little bit inside the nostril. Feel on the inside of the nostril, the wall between the 2 nostrils. Just feel the point there. And you can feel the cool breath in and the warm breath out. It's like a vacation lying by a pool or by a stream. You just dipped your toes in the water as their breath just flows back and forth like waves. Some of you have done long, deep meditations where the feeling of the breath becomes so all-encompassing, where everything else disappears. So I just invite you to imagine that you've been sitting meditating for hours. Each moment of the breath is just pure bliss, pure consciousness. If you notice your mind doing something else, you can watch how you bring your attention back into the breath. You can see what that other experience was. You can do all of that in an instant, automatically. So pay no attention to that, or no thoughts about it or labels about it. Just bringing yourself to the breath. All of the attention is just more deeply in the breath. This single, unified attention, bringing your whole awareness into the breath. In the longer times of silence, try and take yourself even deeper into the stillness. Imagine in any and every moment of your life, every next breath, you can just step fully into presence and awareness. So you could imagine spending more time in this peace, feeling at your very core a sense of peace, calm and presence. Feeling your sense of self as this peaceful being. The foundation of your mind, each moment being pure freedom and pure power. Gigi? Gigi? please, for 2 minutes. Thank you. And for the last part of this meditation, I just invite you to imagine being mindful throughout your day. Just always noticing the thoughts, the feelings, noticing what you think about situations and yourself, and always being able to step out of those thoughts and reactions. Always. Just coming from this place of choosing, from freedom. You might notice that imagination would feel better or stronger if you imagine yourself as an enlightened being, or as a confident, expressive person, or as a loving, caring, supportive, wise person, or whatever your ideal would be. Imagine moving through each day as your best self. I don't want my words to be there. Your best self. Imagine moving through each day, just stepping out of any habits, any reactions, and just being your best self, your true self, what you would choose. I hope that feels great. So let's just take a few breaths where we let the good feelings of that feel better, feel more in our body, feel stronger. And just take a moment to appreciate. So just take a moment to appreciate the time that you gave practicing mindfulness. Every moment you noticed your mind, you've trained yourself to notice more through the rest of your life. Every moment you came into the breath or the stillness, you've trained yourself that that stillness is more accessible. And so then you just become aware of your body and begin to bring yourself out of the meditation. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. If you're here on the live stream, I invite you to look at the people here and imagine the future viewers and just wish peace and happiness and well-being for everyone. And if you're here in the temple, I invite you to look around and really wish peace, happiness, ease, goodness for everybody. And appreciate there are people here caring about you. And then just take a moment to look at yourself, to wish peace, happiness, goodness for yourself. And take a breath, appreciating that you care about yourself. So we're going to stand for our dedication. As we go out, we bow to the enlightened being, and then we join each other out in the field for some social time. So let's all stand. So this dedication is just taking the time that we took and dedicating it. I'm going to make some suggestions, and I hope that you also like these suggestions and dedicate this time in a similar way. Or maybe you can make your own dedication. So I dedicate this time to all of you to be helpful. But I really hope that it's more than just helpful, that it's enlightening, that it's transformative, that it changes your perspective of yourself and others and brings bigger transformations, bigger peace, bigger shifts in your way of being than you thought was possible. I'm also dedicating this time that we can share peace and love and wisdom with others, and we can fill the world with kindness and warmth, mindfulness and enlightenment. And ultimately, we could create a world where everybody is living in being considerate and supportive and helping each other to be living their dream lives. So each of you can follow me at your own pace, and as you bow to the enlightened being, bow to the enlightened being within yourself and within everybody. Will you join me to bow to everybody? Awesome. Thanks everybody. And the live stream's still watching here on my eyes, so maybe you could all just line up and give a bow to everyone who's here now and everyone who will ever watch this. Let's just wish that enlightenment and wisdom out to everyone in the world.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. I like this a lot.
Isn't it great?
You guys are so welcome.